City Clerk? Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our meeting. Today is Tuesday, December 10th. It's 10 a.m., and we are in the city chambers, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Present are City Clerk Heather Taylor, Recording Secretary Miss Susan Hale, Vice Mayor Luke, myself, Mayor McDowell, Commissioner Emmerich, City Attorney Slayton, and City Manager Peter Lear. At this time, we have an invocation by Miss Donna Loughlin with the Church of Peace. If we could all rise, please.
Good morning. Let us pray. Dear God, we are so grateful. Our hearts are filled with gratitude for our pleasure that we have in living in this beautiful city of Northport, for all the ways in which we are protected as people and as environment and animals, and all the ways in which we live safely and beautifully in this community. We bless this meeting this day as it unfolds with ease and grace, knowing that each and every part of the business flows in harmony and in love. We're grateful to be here today. We bless each and every one of you that are participating and speaking. We bless all the good that we have and the much good that will manifest from all of our working together in peace. We pray this now in the name of love, and so it is. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, ma'am. And just for the record, Commissioner Hanks is also here. I went down the line, sorry. We will have Mr. Todd Mathis, he's with Benderson Corporation, come up and please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance if you would like to stand there, please. Thank you, Mr. Mathis.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis. All righty. Let's make sure everybody has their cell phones turned down. We don't want to hear it ringing. Keep conversations to a minimum because you guys, the voices always carry up here much louder than what you realize. So at this time, I will move for an approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
And I have a motion on the floor to approve the agenda as presented by Commissioner Hanks, seconded by Vice Mayor Luke. Anything to that? Call the vote. I got nothing. Oh, I love technology. Okay, and that passes 4-0. Moving on, do we have any public comment, Vice Mayor?
Yes. Is there anything going to be pulled from consent?
Not at this time. All righty. I have 4 public comment cards. If you want to make any public comment, please make sure you fill out one of these cards and get it to the officer. Mr. English, Miss Kelly Youngquist, and Chris Johnson, in that order, please.
I submitted a card. I meant it to be public comment. It is regarding an agenda item, however.
You want to speak
I'll
during
change
this
it.
general comment? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. English, if you would, please. I called Mr. English first, please.
My fault, I let it go. Good morning, Commission. I'm here in reference to a concern I had as it relates to the tree fund. Many months ago, an issue was brought before this commission as it related to what appeared to be by citizens the inappropriate use of that fund. I have never heard any response back as to what the resolve was to that issue. Second, I believe that one of the agenda items that you're going to address may relate to the boards and committees. I would encourage the commission to consider all the boards and committees because you know you have a serious problem. Many of the boards have become more than just rubber stamps. A lot of the boards are just a nuisance to certain members of staff. They take up staff time, and they are an impediment to what they believe is their judgment. I'm not saying across the board, it's just a bureaucratic thing. Also, it would probably suit the commission to form a committee to review all the boards and committees and find out what their overall input is, how they can be utilized more efficiency for the commission, which I believe the commission totally underutilizes your boards and committees, and that's why you're having an issue with keeping them. Other than that, y'all have a Merry Christmas, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. English. Just so you know, at the last meeting, we gave a consensus for the city manager and city attorney to bring, or whoever, bring forth an agenda item to discuss possibly having a commissioner sitting on these advisory boards. So maybe that will be helpful in some of the concerns that the board members are having. You're welcome. All right, next, Mr. Youngquist. I'm sorry, Ms. Youngquist.
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
Hi, Pete. I don't know if you remember us from the other night. We actually went back looking for the hair bow, and we didn't find it. What we did find was a couple of balloons just floating around nearby, which is actually why I'm here today, is to talk about that a little bit. On Saturday, we attended the Poinsettia Parade, which was an overall very fun event for the family. However, during the parade, we were really quite heartbroken to see the many balloons float off through the sky, knowing full well that when a released balloon deflates or pops, it will eventually end up in our waterways. It is here the balloons cause a detrimental harm to our birds and sea life. Once in the water, a deflated balloon resembles jellyfish, a common meal for sea turtles. When a balloon becomes a meal for wildlife, it is often their last. I am here to urge you to take action against the pollution they cause. Palm Beach County has already teamed up with the Loggerhead Marine Life Center to promote the safety and protection of sea turtles. In 2017, they passed a law banning the use of balloons in their county parks. And I believe it is in our city's best interest to follow in their footsteps by doing the same. So doing so, we will be setting a positive example to the rest of our beautiful state. Tourists come from all over the world to see our wildlife. They are in our parks, they are kayaking our waterways. It is our responsibility to not just the wildlife, but our local tourism, to keep our parks clean of harmful litter and filled with the sounds of happy, thriving wildlife. I hope you will take my request under serious consideration. Our ecosystems and the tourism they provide are dependent on our choices. Thank you.
You did great. I know you were nervous. Thank you very much. Chris Johnson.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Chris Johnson, and I'd like to introduce myself. I am the CEO at Suncoast Partnership to End Homelessness. Suncoast Partnership is the lead agency for our continuum of care across Sarasota and Manatee counties. We are the applicant for federal funds and state funds through the Office of Homelessness for any service provider that provides homeless services throughout Sarasota and Manatee. And so I'm here on two reasons, is that one, just to introduce myself because I took this role about 2.5 months ago. And so I'm making sure that everyone knows the change in leadership there. But the second part is that just to speak about those that as we go into the holidays and we talk about being home for Christmas and home for the holidays, that there's those who don't have a home to go to yet. And just to give you some information about what's happening in Sarasota County, and then also to commend you on your homeless outreach teams, the officers that you have designated as a homeless outreach team. Me and my staff both work with Officer Finnegan, and she's fantastic, and we're just so grateful that you guys have made those strides because the homeless outreach team model is successful across the county and across the country in other areas that it's actually instituted. So just so you guys kind of know the lay of the land right now when it comes to homelessness in Sarasota County, and this is across the entire county, not really congregated in one area, we use an acuity scale of vulnerability to indicate whether someone is going to be able to resolve their homelessness on their own, or whether they're going to need assistance. And those levels of assistance kind of take two main sections, which is one, they're going to need about 12 months to 24 months of help. Rental assistance, supportive services through case management, mental health services. And then we have a high acuity, or the highest acuity group, that's going to need long-term assistance. So throughout the county right now, we have about 11% of our homeless population that is going to self-resolve on their own. They're going to be able to get back into housing on their own with very little help. We have about 56% of those individuals who are going to need that 1 to 2 years of help, and another 33% that are the highest acuity that will need long-term mental health stability or supports, as well as case management supports. So I give you that just to say thank you again for your homeless outreach teams, because the outreach component of that is key, especially reaching the higher acuity levels. Without good outreach, we can't reach those individuals because they just are service resistant because of the mental health component. So thank you guys very much for everything you all do, and please let us know that as far as Suncoast Partnership goes, how we can assist in any way, shape, or form in Northport.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
It's very impressive that you come and do that, so thank you very much, Chris.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you guys.
I'll see you soon.
Thank you, sir. City Manager, could you please have somebody from staff get his contact information for myself? Thank you. All right, next is going to be Miss Alice White.
Oh, okay. Hi, Alice White. I just wanted to make a comment concerning the tree fund, as Mr. English alluded to, that, again, it's not being used in accordance with the specific uses that's outlined in Chapter 45. First, I have a real concern about paying 2 employees 50% of their salaries from that tree fund, when the majority of their time is spent reviewing development plans and doing site inspections. Commissioner Luke, we had a really good conversation about trees some time ago, and I appreciate that. And we talked about how will they go out and measure trees, and that maybe justifies using the tree fund to pay half their salaries. But I was on that board again that came up with these reasons, and we came up with these reasons so that money wouldn't be misused. And here's the uses. Purchasing property to be used only for tree preservation purposes, planting trees according to a priority list on public lands, the first priority being street trees, educating the public on the proper care of trees, maintaining tree health for trees that were planted using tree fund money, and purchasing conservation easements on privately owned property within the city. There's nothing in there about development procedures, measuring trees. That would be great if they actually kept trees, if we saw more trees being kept. But we know that's not really happening. So again, I just wanted to read that into the record, and hope that you do look into that, the use of that tree fund, and have it be used the way that we planned for it to be used. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. City Manager, since 2 of our citizens have spoke about misappropriation of funds, could you please weigh in or get with our citizens?
Yes, ma'am, I can tell you we are not misappropriating funds. Those are legal uses of the tree fund money. We had a legal opinion done years ago when it was put for the arborist salary at that time to come 100% out of there. Subsequently, commission has reduced that amount to 50% that is coming out of there. But those funds are legally being used.
Thank you, City Manager. Ms. Fisher, Nancy Fisher?
Hi, my name is Nancy Fisher. I live in North Step Street. And I'd like to speak to the commission about the Tree Beautification Committee. It's my understanding that there's some discussion about disbanding the committee and combining it with another committee, which would dilute its purpose and its importance in the city. So I ask instead that you be strengthening the board's importance in relation to the city staff and administration. I'm very concerned that a legal opinion was done years ago about the use of the funds. I question salaries when salaries aren't explicitly stated in what's allowed. Perhaps another council review from a new city attorney might be wise to verify that, because I'm very concerned that from my understanding of reading what's allowable, that salaries would be allowed. When I chose to buy my home in Northport, among the factors that attracted me was that the city had an overall urban development plan with a tree ordinance and was designated a tree city by the Arbor Foundation. Silly me, I really thought that this city meant that the city valued trees and cared about trees. I've learned a lot in the 5 years I've lived here. And first of all, that the Arbor Day Foundation needs to know that the city of Northport seems to like to use the Arbor Day designation as Tree City USA as a marketing tool. It certainly caught my attention. But the true preservation of the tree canopy in the city of Northport is an ongoing and responsibility of the city. One of the things that the committee should be doing for the city is helping to update the tree list that residents use in replacing trees in the yards and so on. The tree list was virtually useless to me, and without the city arborist giving me some guidance, it wouldn't have been helpful. The city seems to waive tree planting requirements for developers. Clear-cut lots are de rigueur for siting a new house. When I was planting trees to replace the tree I had to take down, the city arborist assured me that mature trees were maintained and every effort was done to do so. But that's not what I see. I hear chainsaws going on Saturday and Sunday when the staff isn't on duty. People take down trees in the off hours because they don't want to deal with what they see as an onerous process. Clear cutting is done, and we're going to see more of it as the city grows out. We really need to enforce and treasure our tree canopy because it's what protects us as the climate warms and the sea levels rise and the planet warms and we suffer more severe weather events. It's our duty to do our part.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Please don't abolish the committee.
Any more public comment cards, Vice Mayor?
Not for general.
Moving on to announcements, please, City Clerk.
Current vacancies for the following boards and committees include the Art Advisory Board, Audit Committee, Charter Review Advisory Board, Citizens Tax Oversight Committee, Community Economic Development Advisory Board, Environmental Advisory Board, Historic and Cultural Advisory Board, Joint Management Advisory Board, Northport Youth Council, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Planning and Zoning Advisory Board, Public Utility Advisory Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Beautification and Tree Scenic Highway Committee. The upcoming expirations for the following advisory boards and committees: Citizen Tax Oversight Committee, Environmental Advisory Board, Firefighters Pension Board of Trustees, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Police Officers Pension Board of Trustees, and Public Utilities Advisory Board. One Northport resident to serve on the Sarasota Manatee Metropolitan Planning Organization's Citizen Advisory Committee. If anyone would like more information, please see the City Clerk's office. Thank you.
Thank you, City Clerk. Moving on to consent. City Manager, has any items been requested to be pulled from consent?
Mayor, 3 items were requested, and then subsequently they were requested to no longer be pulled because all the questions answered. Those were items 4E, H, and K. So at this point, they've not been requested to be pulled anymore.
Does anybody have anything?
I'll make a motion. Move to approve consent agenda as presented.
Motion on the floor by Vice Mayor to approve the consent agenda as presented, seconded by Commissioner Hanks. Anything to that?
No questions were answered by staff for me, so thank you very much.
Commissioner Hanks, do you have anything to that? Awesome.
No, ma'am.
All right, let's take the vote. And that passed 4-0. All right, moving on to public hearing for the Development Master Plan for Woodlands Phase 1. This is quasi-judicial sheet. At this time, City Clerk, if you could please swear in anybody who would like to give testimony.
You want me to read the petition title first?
Sorry, yes.
DMP 19-186, Development Master Plan Woodlands Phase 1, 288,510 square feet of light industrial, flex warehouse, and office space. Can anyone wishing to provide testimony please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to provide is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge, so help you God?
I do.
All right, at this time, we'll do disclosure of ex parte communication, starting with Commissioner Emmerich.
I have had none.
Myself, I did send an email with questions which were answered and are already been sent to the city clerk's office for the record. Commissioner, Vice Mayor Luke?
I've had some conversations through the development of this, actually, with Larry Feinberg through the Sarasota County EDC. I have also pointed potential businesses, one in particular, a brewery, to that development to potentially bring more business to the area. And outside of that, nothing.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Hanks, did you have any ex parte?
In an unrelated meeting with Mr. Mathis, a picture was shown to me, but that's it, like a rendering, that's it.
And seeing no other, we'll have the applicant make his presentation. Sir, you have 20 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Commissioners. I have a brief PowerPoint I can bring up here. Thanks, Commissioners. My name is Todd Mathis, representing Benderson Development. I've been sworn. Our office address is 7978 Cooper Creek Boulevard in University Park. I'm joined by Christopher Hatton and Clint Cuffle, our project engineers, transportation and civil. The three of us have worked together on our various projects in Northport over almost the last decade and everything we've done together. And Cameron is our planning and landscape coordinator, internal to Benderson, new to us as a company, but has been running point on landscape on this project. So if we have any questions about those issues as we go along, I might bring one of them along to answer those questions. The location of the project on the bottom left of the screen is generally 47 acres at the southeast corner of Toledo Blade and Plantation, between Plantation and Panacea Boulevards. We're in the Panacea DRI. It's Activity Center 4, and we have a planned community development zoning designation. This is actually the site. We previously started construction of this site back in 2005 when there was a commercial center planned here. You can see in the middle of the screen a 16-acre wetland that was actually impacted and filled, and mitigation for that wetland was provided within the Panacea DRI. As part of this impact, there was actually 88 acres on the north side of Panacea Boulevard, south of I-75, which exists on site, which remains in our control and has always been a permitted wetland mitigation area. In total, there's over 200 acres of wetland mitigation within the Panacea DRI for various impacts that have occurred over time with other portions of the development. But we impacted that area and filled it, and we also started construction of 2 driveways along Plantation Boulevard for that project. The economy started to fail. We stopped the project, and many years later, we're here with a slightly different project. We're proposing 288,000 square feet of what we call flex warehouse space. It really houses a variety of different users. We have a lot of this product in Manatee County. About 1 million square feet in Sarasota Commerce Center. We have a large project we built about 6 years ago along 301 near Televast, and we're currently building another 2.5 million feet near the river in Ellington. We've been spending a long time evaluating Sarasota County as a market and decided to move forward with a project here. We have a couple of new businesses going into the end caps of this proposed building if we're successful in moving the project forward. And it's flexible warehouse space. So you see a lot of traditional warehousing. You see a lot of light assembly uses. You see some light industrial uses. You see some true office uses. You see a little bit of sort of wholesale retailing out the front door. We get a lot of different users. We get everyone from Lockheed Martin's doing very innovative high-tech work in our parks to local home suppliers And it's really an incubation space where businesses can grow and grow into space and grow into more space. And hopefully the goal would be that we're very successful with this project, and someday we come back to the commission and propose a project to the south of it on the remainder of our property running to Panacea Boulevard. But for right now, it's a 288,000 square foot proposal in 2 buildings with right in, right out access to Toledo Blade at our south corner of our project limits. And we're going to use the 2 existing driveway stubs which are built along Plantation for additional access to the site. Stormwater is designed to the rear of the property and includes a 9-acre area off of this page, which is our floodplain compensation area. And as I mentioned before, we have that wetland mitigation, 80-plus acres on the north side of Plantation that's tied to the prior impacts to a wetland on this site. We supplied traffic, environmental, and architectural plans to your staff, which have been reviewed, and we received comments and worked through those comments. Your staff report, I won't go through it in detail, I know you have it, was a recommendation of approval, including a number of findings of comprehensive plan consistency. So we respectfully ask that that be incorporated into the record. And we have 2 specific waivers we're requesting with respect to parking, a waiver from 2517B and 55-8 of the zoning code. They pertain to the location and number of parking. So we basically took a blended rate of parking between those uses I described earlier and came up with a ratio of 1 per 1,000 square feet. It's what we have at all those other centers I mentioned. In Manatee County, we own a lot of this product throughout the United States. It's generally how we build these centers, and it's generally been very successful. So we feel that we're not over or under parking this project with that ratio. And the other was an activity center or design standard, which asks for 1 row of parking along the street front of the building. We'd like to have 2 rows of parking to set the building further back, given the scale and length of the building. We think it's appropriate to provide some more buffer and relief between Toledo Blade and the building itself, and it lays out very efficiently with parking rather than moving those buildings forward and adding the parking to the rear of the site. With that, Commissioners, we're here to answer your questions and appreciate the time you're taking to evaluate this. Thank you.
Thank you. That didn't take the full 20 minutes at all.
No.
And staff, if you would like to give your presentation, you also have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. For the record, Allison Christie, Neighborhood Development Services, and I have been sworn. Just to reiterate what the applicant said, so this development master plan is for approximately 288,000 square feet of light industrial, flex warehouse, and office space located in Activity Center 4. It's just south of Plantation Boulevard, north of Panacea, and just east of Toledo Blade Boulevard. It includes 2 buildings, each approximately 142,000 square feet, and 2 out parcels available for future development along Plantation. So as a part of this process, the applicant is requesting 2 waivers. The first is to allow a parking calculation of 1 space per 1,000 square feet. This is a compromise between the calculations that we use for office and what we use for warehouse. And staff does support this waiver as we don't know what the use is going to be at this point. The second is to allow for 2 rows of parking along Toledo Blade Boulevard. The Urban Design Standards pattern book usually only allows 1 row of parking along the building frontage to support a Main Street feel. As this is a larger scale light industrial project, we feel that 2 rows of parking is appropriate, and they will still be required to meet our design standards for that activity center, which is Spanish Mediterranean in this case. The applicant held their required neighborhood meeting on November 14th, and they did meet the noticing requirements per the ULDC. Staff reviewed the development master plan for consistency with the comprehensive plan and the ULDC and found it to be consistent with both documents. We would like to recommend 2 additional changes that were not mentioned in the staff report. They were mentioned in the Planning and Zoning Advisory Board meeting. Note 15 on the development master plan sheet under general notes regarding impact fees, we would like that to be stricken in its entirety. And note 14 under general notes on that same sheet should be amended to read, to be coordinated with city staff during approval of the urban design standards review. Presently, it says during the building permit submittal, so we just like to make that change. Staff does recommend approval of the development master plan with the requested waivers and with the conditions outlined in the staff report, as well as those 2 changes that I just mentioned on the record today. The Planning and Zoning Advisory Board did go over this project at their December 5th meeting, and they voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend approval of this project with the requested waivers and conditions. Thank you.
That's all, ma'am?
Mhm.
Thank you. All right. At this time, does the applicant have any rebuttal?
No.
Would you please state it for the record, please?
No rebuttal, Commissioners. Thank you.
Fantastic. And staff?
Staff has no rebuttal.
Are there any aggrieved parties? I do not see any. It wasn't advised to me. I just wanted stated for the record, there's no aggrieved parties. At this time, we'll go ahead and take public comment. Vice Mayor, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Seeing no public comment, at this time, we will go ahead and move on to questions. And just for the record, Commissioner Carasone has arrived at 10:32. So we'll start with questions, and make sure you use your buttons, please. Seeing no questions, I will then move on to mine. I don't see any trees on the blueprints that were supplied to us, but I also do not see a waiver for tree code.
Yes, so we require that at the major site and development plan, which is the next step in our approval process. They would be required to submit the landscape plan and tree surveys at that point. This is supposed to be more of a broader scale, so the code doesn't require trees at this stage.
Thank you for that clarification. If you look at page C100 on the paperwork that was supplied in the backup material, there is an error. It says under the building summary and parking calculations that building 1A is 142,500 square feet. I do believe you mean that to be building B1.
We can make that change.
And then building B1 through B4, they need to be correctly reflected. I think it's just flip-flopped, that one building is the largest one, and then the other building is broken out, so I think it needs to be flopped. And I'm not even sure, based on the picture that was shown in his presentation, which one is accurate.
Commissioner, you're correct. That should reference B1 and A1. They're just flipped.
Okay,
Based
so
on what's on C100.
So
This is
what
just
is-
an illustrative plan that I showed you.
what is showing on the diagram as B1, it should actually be A1?
Correct.
Thank you. And that will be changed, or do we need to include that in the motion?
I think you include it in the motion with those 2 notes. We can have all that changed.
Thank you. I reviewed the traffic impact study, and it states that there should be a right in, right out only egress on Plantation, and that's from what I think is the westernmost, the one closest to Toledo Blade. And it says that right now, the diagram shows that it has a median with an opening, but as the project progresses, that median will be closed and made into a right-in, right-out, but I don't see that notated on the blueprints, nor do I see it notated in staff report. It's just in this traffic impact study. How do we get it noted so that way then, years down the road, that does get done?
You can go ahead.
We concurrently produce both the MAS and DMP here, so we have actually fully designed and engineered that, and that was a condition of the MAS. If you'd like to add it as a condition, that would be appropriate here as well. That's certainly fine with us. We intend to build that median.
Yeah, because it's my understanding you're doing one building, and then at some point in the future, you're going to be doing the second building?
That's how we have initially presented it. In all likelihood, we are going to move both of these buildings forward concurrently. So we're prepared to turn that into a write in, write out. It only works that way,
Alright.
right away. So if
And-
you want to add that condition that as in this context, that's fine with us, Commissioner.
Yeah, and I think it would be very wise to add that condition because we know that market things can change and who knows, 10 years from now when this is all over, oh, we were supposed to do this. It's better to have it throughout the whole thing, so thank you for that. The two out parcels that you have closest to Plantation by Toledo Blade, are they part of this DMP and part of what we're approving? Or is that coming later because it's on the blueprint?
Yeah, so it is part of this DMP. I believe they're just labeled for future development right now. So they would come and do a DMP amendment at the time that those are going to be developed.
Does anybody know what the weight limits are on Plantation, Panacea, and Toledo Blade for semi-trucks?
I'm going to defer that question.
And I'm asking for gross weight, so it includes everything.
For the record, Nicole Galehouse, and I have been sworn planning manager. Bear with me, I'm trying to find my email on this. The minimum weight that is permitted is 32 tons, I believe. The maximum legal weight that is allowed is 80,000 pounds, and that's pursuant to state of Florida roadway limits. What was explained to me from our Public Works Department is that within the city, there are certain roadways where semis are allowed to operate on in going through, but they are allowed to operate on other roadways if it's getting to their destination point. So they have to stay on those roadways that they're designated to operate on until they need to get off to go to their destination. So Toledo Blade is one of those designated roadways. So in this case, to get to this development, they would stay on Toledo Blade until they get to a Plantation, and then they would turn off and enter the development.
So if Toledo Blade has a minimum set of 32,000 pounds?
32 tons.
32 tons.
That our code regulation is a minimum of 32 tons for a fire truck.
Okay, so if a semi has more weight than that, correct? Because if this state highway has 80,000,
80,000 pounds is the maximum.
okay, so let's talk tons or pounds, which, please.
I'm working off two different sets of regulations, sorry. So the maximum legal weight allowed is 80,000 pounds. It's further down in here, it states that tractor, tanker, semi-trailer, maximum weight allowed is 73,000 pounds. Tractor, semi-trailer, it says, doesn't have the same regulation. Jerry, do you want to?
So, what is it, 2,000 pounds equals a ton?
Yes.
Thank you. So if the highway, interstate highway system allows 40 tons, correct? And our roadway system is 32 tons, what happens when our roadways start to deteriorate because of the use of the semis?
The roadways are a minimum of 32 tons. I don't know what they've, like, that's the minimum they have to be constructed to. I'll let Jerry help me out on his own.
For the record, Jerry Traverso, Engineering Division Manager. The way that you design roads, if you take 42 tons and you have only two axles, the front and the back, it's, in theory, is divided half and half. That's why you have semis with multiple axles, meaning that it distributes the weight. So the heavier the load, the more axles you can have. And I don't know if you have seen cranes on I-75 that they have like 8, 10 axles, is to distribute that. And because a heavy truck drive through a road doesn't mean that it's gonna tear it up. It's called repetitions. And the way the DOT and every pavement design is done is called ESA, it's equivalent single axle load. And the base for determination is 18,000 pounds per axle. That's like the baseline. So a heavier truck will take less repetitions to mess up that pavement, and a lighter load will take more repetitions. So we can, that pavement can be designed, and we're trying to look at what is existing there to determine what the load is support, but that little section, it can be in the future, it can be repaved and increase the pavement structure to take any future loads. Now, we don't say that of today, if they open that building, in a year, it will go to shambles. I mean, it will have to do a core and see the condition of the pavement and how thick it is to determine if this development would affect that section of Toledo Blade.
And you hit on exactly why I'm asking this question, because if, I understand that Toledo Blade probably has a much higher weight limit than possibly Plantation or Panacea. And I'm concerned with the constant wear and tear on even that little segment of the roads based on this development, and who would be responsible for that?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was sworn.
Thank you.
Skipped a little detail,
I saw your
sorry.
hand up.
Yes.
So my concern, back to the concern about who is responsible for fixing that segment of roadway that is directly caused by this development.
For the record, Juliana Belia, and I have been sworn Public Works Director. In the city of Northport, we have a construction traffic road fee. All developers pay into that fee. We take photographs before, during, and after development. We have infrastructure inspectors that do that. Any damages to any roadways is the responsibility of the developer to correct.
And that's only for construction.
During construction.
I'm talking
During
about
construction.
after, because this is going to be a light industrial area, there's going to be semis coming in and out of there. I'm concerned about the roadway deterioration because of this development. Who is responsible for fixing that roadway because of this development?
During the construction, until all final certificates of occupancy are issued for the development, it would be the contractor or the developer.
And what happens after construction with an industrial park?
After construction is complete, before the certificate of occupancies are issued for each building, our inspectors will do an inspection. If there's any deterioration of the road that we have evidence that was caused by that developer, their trucks, their truck traffic from all their contractors and so forth, they will be responsible for the repair of that roadway.
I think what she's asking, I think what the mayor's asking is 5 years from now, all the trucks going in and out of there, whose responsibility is it for us to?
Impact.
That would be the City of Northport Road and Drainage District.
Thank
Our
you.
funds, yes, ma'am.
And then we would have to redo that segment of roadway after the construction, and if the industrial park causes harm to the road.
Yes, ma'am. So in the scenario, they have come in, they have constructed their development, they have paid into the road, the construction traffic road fee, and typically what we do is when we are reviewing annually to determine what roads need to be repaved within the city, that would be one of our funding sources. So in theory, what's going to happen is later on, when that road does in fact need to be repaved, way back when, they would have paid into it as a developer, because that's their responsibility. We would have the funding from them to pay for that road to be repaved.
The fiscal analysis that was supplied, I'm curious about the impact fees. Was that using the current 75%, or is that using the 42.5?
It was using the old impact fees. We have a consultant that works with us to update our model, and it's a little bit more involved to get that updated, so we haven't yet. But the applicant is aware of the increase in impact fees.
And are they going to get that model fixed for future fiscal analyses?
We're in the process of working on it. It's just not as cut and dry as you would think it should be.
It sounds easy peasy.
It does, but it's.
But we would invite you to come down if you'd like to help us with
No, thank you. Okay, that's all I have. I do not see any other questions unless anybody else has some follow-up questions. Commissioner Carrison.
I do not have a question, but I do need to state that as far as ex parte, I have discussed this project with representatives from the EDC several times throughout the year.
Thank you for that. Alrighty, so at this time, we will move on to closing argument. Staff
Staff does not have any closing arguments.
and applicant.
Thanks, Commissioners. I'll be very brief. Again, this is part of the Panacea DRI development. There was 871,000 feet of commercial industrial planned for this property. Hopefully, a lot of that is realized over the coming years. This is a good first start to that end of the project. It involved the construction of Panacea and Plantation Boulevards by our company to city design standards, anticipating the sort of traffic we were talking about. So we're excited to move it forward because it's only been homes and it's been a slow go with the homes over the years, but the property's on its feet, and we think it's a nice positive thing for Northport. We've worked here for a while now, and we've dealt with a lot of different staff. Your staff has been really terrific. A lot of new people, we put a lot of pressure on to get this to the board now so we can move it forward for the businesses that we hope to accommodate, and they really have been tremendous, professional, smart. We appreciate their time and energy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no other questions, comments, public comment, anything, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve petition number DMP 19-186 with waiver request to allow each 1,000 square foot of floor area parking calculation for the entire project, and waiver request to allow for 2 rows of parking along Toledo Boulevard to which the front of the building is facing. Also with the conditions of striking note 15 and then changing the words within note 14 as stated by staff. Also correcting the labels of the buildings so that each building is the building that it represents within the mapping. And then also a condition of the median in the future on Plantation.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor as stated by Commissioner Luke and seconded by, as stated by Vice Mayor Luke, seconded by Commissioner Hanks. Oh my God.
We're here.
Anything to that?
It's the chair.
It is the chair. It is the chair. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this project. It is bringing something that we have talked about for a long time needing within the city, and it's a springboard. This is a property and a design for that area for this type of development to be done. So I appreciate the project and looking forward to what unveils itself, especially that first business coming in. Thank you.
Anything to that, Commissioner Hanks?
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. I think it's a great project. It's something, that Northport's been wanting, it's necessary in our county and South County, and I greatly appreciate the Bendersons and all they do to bring balanced business to us. I appreciate everything that you guys do, even for our environment, with the mitigation and all that stuff that you do. So I appreciate it, and thank you guys for doing it.
Seeing no other comments, I want to double check something, City Attorney. On the last page, section 7 of conditions and safeguards of the staff report, it says that there are some conditions for the utilities. Does that need to be approved now? Because it says was approved by staff with the following conditions. Commission has to approve the DMP, but I did not hear any discussion about the utilities conditions.
And I apologize, that does need to be added into the motion. Thank you for the reminder. So I'll make an amendment to the motion that we add the conditions set forward by Utilities Department.
I have an amendment to the motion by Vice Mayor to add the utilities conditions to the main motion, seconded by Commissioner Carasone. Anything, Vice Mayor?
No, that was just my doof. I didn't see it in the in this. I forgot about it.
It's all right. That's why we all work together. Commissioner Carasone, anything to that?
I just thought that was included in the original motion, so I didn't think it was, because you said staff recommendation, so I didn't realize that it was 2 separate.
All right, so let's take a vote. Seeing no other comments on the amendment. And that passed 5-0. And speaking to the main motion, I'm really excited to see how this is going to turn out. This has been something that the city has been wanting and needing, and thank you. And good luck with your development, and we'll call the question. And that motion as amended passes 5-0.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Moving on to public hearing for the first reading of the fence ordinance, ordinance number 2019-15. Can I get a motion to read by title only, please? Motion on the floor by Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Carasone. Anything to that? Let's call the vote. All right, and that passed 5-0. City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, amending the Unified Land Development Code related to fences by amending Section 53-3, Section 53-240, and Section 61-3, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, City Clerk. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This all started back in July of 2018 when we had a request to increase the 6-foot fence height limit in residential areas, and how that was measured. We've had multiple meetings and workshops on this item. Staff has prepared the ordinance based on the direction they were given from the commission. It's been presented to the Planning and Zoning Advisory Board, who did have some concerns that are outlaid in both the staff summary and their report. Well, they are in the staff summary. I'm looking at it right now.
Okay.
That being said, staff is here with any questions you have on this item.
All right, does staff want to make a presentation or anything about this? Does the commission want to hear a presentation?
Sure.
All right, I'm hearing a yes and I'm hearing a no. So let's get consensus. Do we want staff to make a presentation?
I don't need it.
Commissioner Luke?
I'd like to hear their feedback after going in with PSAB.
Myself, yes.
Oh, no. We have it in our backup.
All right. And that consensus fails. So moving on to questions, Commissioner Carrison.
First of all, I need to ask about the staff summary on page 3, where you talk about the fence height and setback in front yards, the yards adjacent to roadways. If they're not set back to 15 feet, then they have to have a lower height, correct? Then it becomes 6 foot? Is that what it is? That's how I understood it, that if you have your backyard that's adjacent to a roadway, then you're not allowed to have the 8-foot fence.
I believe so.
Okay, so that's a problem. What I understand that if you access that fence, then that would be one thing, but if it's just a fence and you can't access the roadway, then why wouldn't, I mean, we already have 8-foot fences along Salford, Sumter, most of which are vinyl. So I don't know why we would have that unless it was an access issue. Then I could understand the impact of the line of sight, so, which would be line going through the strike-through underline version. I believe it's line 85.
So, in looking at this, it's when the side or rear yard abuts the street, you're correct, it would have to be set back at least 15 feet in order to be 8 foot high. Or if, it could be along the roadway if it was smaller or lower heights. And the reason for that is partially because of access, but it's also going to potentially impact, the future home where they can put their driveway. This was part of the conversation we had back in March, where I believe we ended up with this language.
How would it impact a driveway if it's
On the next door
running
neighbor's
parallel
home.
to a roadway?
So you have the next door neighbor, if they put a home there, and it's got an 8-foot fence, they
I
won't
see
have
what you're
safe line of
saying.
sight in order to be able to get out of their own house.
I get what you're saying now. So if it's beyond the 15 feet, but if it's beyond the 15 feet, it can be 8 foot, right? Yes. Okay. All right, then I get what you're saying. I don't have a problem with that. As long as it's, all right, because we do, that's another thing, is that there's a lot of things in here now that are a little concerning because, let me go to page, let me find it now. Has to do with the water, being on the water.
Line 185.
Yep, good job, good job. So the location, the 20 feet from the water body, here's what my problem is that at one time, and I'm gonna use mine and my neighbor's fence as an example, it used to be the 20 feet on a drainage canal. But since the road and drainage have been mowing it, the what do you call it? The embankment is pretty much falling in. And so it's no longer 20 feet. It's actually less. And the whole entire embankment is becoming unstable. So my question is, what do you do about those who have a legal conforming fence, who got the permit, it was within the 15, 20 feet, but now today, because of erosion or what have you, or even changes in code, because some changes in code, I mean, we didn't have lot lines back in 2008. You could put it right on the line. Is there going to be a grandfather clause?
I believe if it was constructed legally, it would be non-conforming. And then if they needed to reconstruct over a certain percentage, then we would need to it would need to be brought into conformance with current standards.
Okay, so at currently non-conforming, is that going to cause a problem with someone who, say, sells their house?
No, non-conformities can transfer ownership.
Okay, if it was conforming at one time and now currently non-conforming, is there any negative impacts to that?
Really the only impact for non-conforming is if you're trying to expand the non-conformity. So let's say they only had a portion of their yard fence and they wanted to, use that same line for the rest of their yard.
Then
They
what would
wouldn't
they
be able
do?
to. They'd have to jog it back and go down the original line, but
What would they have to do to fix that? Because say you own 3 lots and you want to run parallel, now you got to have your other, you've got Julie's there.
Miss Julie, go ahead, please.
Yes, ma'am. For the record, Juliana Belia, Public Works Director. There's a couple of things. First of all, on your property lines that are abutting waterways or drainage retention areas, you have a 20-foot drainage and utility easement along the back that goes from the rear property line back, let's say toward your home. That's all encompassed on private property. That has nothing to do with the retention ditch or the R ditch. So what you're speaking about, Commissioner Carazone, is when you have an R ditch and let's say it's getting undermined and falling in, eventually my department will be going through and reconstructing, rehabilitating all of the R ditches and building that back up. So that would have absolutely no effect on where you'd want to put your fence, because there would not be in that case that I'm speaking about, there wouldn't be a nonconformity because you're going from the back property line 20 feet back anyways on your private property.
Right, okay,
Yes,
I see
ma'am.
what you're saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Because my concern is that it's no longer 20 feet.
Correct,
It's maybe,
yes.
11.
And this would all be private property. And we have had some cases very limited where people it's gone the encroachment into the private property. And in that case, the builder would, come in with fill to build that back up when he's building the home.
It's quite scary when they're cutting back there. I'm waiting for one of them to go in.
Yes, ma'am.
But don't go anywhere because I got a second problem. It says that you can't run a fence along, on page 6 of the actual ordinance, the 43,560 square feet, which means that it has to be over an acre. But if you have, say, 3 lots, 4 lots, 5 lots side by side, are you saying that you can't have those, they can't be fenced to the 8-foot requirement? Is that what they're saying?
No, that's for residential property entries. So, when you have like the poles, or not poles, but like the monuments in the front and they've got the pretty gate and whatnot on them, that's what that's referring to. You have to have at least an acre for that.
Okay. So now here, it says that you can't, where's the wording? No impediment of the city's ability to properly maintain the public easement. And then it also talks about water structures of some sort, but previously. We have a drainage ditch that goes between our two properties that we own. The lot line is dissolved, and I would assume there's many others that are in the same position. If we were wanting to put a fence up along our entire property, we're not going to be allowed to, correct?
So if I recall correctly, on your property, you have what's called a side outfall easement, and that's a platted area for the water to run through. You would not be able to put a fence there. If it were piped and enclosed, that would be a different story.
Okay.
So if you
So
piped
now-
it, enclosed it, and sodded it and so forth, that would be different, because then the water would be going underneath into the pipe.
It's already piped.
It's already piped.
Yeah.
It's already piped.
I'm not-
Okay.
You just wouldn't be able to put stakes in it probably so that it would impede the concrete. But what about people who have their lot lines dissolved, but there's a drainage that goes between those lots because they were individual lot, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yep. If there's platted easements on there, you would not be allowed to put the fence within that area.
Well,
In other
what
words,
if it-
because that's a platted easement. That's not part of your private property. It depends on what it is. If it's a right-of-way, if it's just the outfall easement, but if it's platted and has 20-foot setbacks, then that'd be a different story. You'd have to be set back with your fence.
If I remember correctly, this property, and I want to be very clear that this was not about one particular email or one particular resident. This was several residents. This was not one person.
Okay.
So it was two properties side by side, but there was a almost like a Texas swale between the two properties. And they did wind up getting a fence permit, by the way. I mean, this was years ago. But now they purchased the lot next door, okay? So they combined the two lots. The lot line is now dissolved.
Okay. So the lot line is, right. Yes, ma'am. It depends on what it is. If it's a platted right-of-way, like a drainage right-of-way, because for so many properties, in between the sides, you're gonna have outfall easements for the water to go under the road between the two properties and outfall into the back waterway. So it just depends.
So you could theoretically get away with putting a fence as long as it's high enough so that it doesn't prevent the water flow, pretty much.
Pretty much.
In that particular case. Okay, my very last question has to do with the design requirements. What is it currently? Because I don't remember engineering being needed for any.
Engineering is not currently needed in
Right.
our fence ordinance because it does not exceed 6 feet. When it exceeds
Okay.
6 feet, it's considered a structure by the Florida Building Code, and engineering would be required.
Okay, so in this case, it's only if it
Yes.
exceeds the 6-foot criteria.
That's correct.
Then it would need some sort of engineer plan to,
Correct.
and that could be done basically with, well, does it have to be a provide
Yes, I believe it would need to be a
provide
certified
engineer plan? Okay. I mean, I would think that if you're gonna go to 8 feet, you'll have someone install it, and then they would be able to provide the wind load and all that. And I think that is it.
All right, thank you,
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Garrison. Anybody else have any questions? Commissioner Luke, Vice Mayor Luke?
This is for staff. I noticed in the staff report that you were talking about limiting it to 8 feet. How does that benefit the person such as the one who emailed? And I agree with Commissioner Carazone, it wasn't just one. I mean, we've had several people, as long as we've had to add fill for these septic tanks and the houses are put on mounds, it's been something that I've heard discussed over and over. So how does limiting it to 8 feet aid that citizen who has that problem that was described in the email?
It would still allow them to compensate for some of the fill. It may not necessarily be all of the fill. Sometimes you have a range from 3 to 6 feet of fill. So, if you're on the high end of that, you would potentially have a 14-foot fence, which is very tall. And most of our homes have a setback of 7.5 feet. So there's some other potential complications and issues that could arise if, the fence falls over. It's going to hit one of the homes if they're both only a 7.5-foot setback. There's also some concerns from the zoning staff in terms of how to properly inspect and approve the height of the fence, because measuring it on site is going to be challenging. You have to find essentially a level or a laser from the home to the fence and then measure from there up that it's 8 feet from that point. So it can be done, it's just challenging from that perspective as well. So there's just some reasons why we wanted to recommend an 8-foot maximum limit, upper limit.
But if that fill can be up to between 3 and 6 feet, that makes that 8-foot fence only 2 foot, from the view.
Right, it would not necessarily solve every issue there. The homeowner does have other options, so although I don't think they're super likely to take them, they could put the fence closer to the home, which would then give them permissions, but then they're losing some of their yard. So there's definitely no perfect answer for everything. You just have to kind of come up with the best compromise between all of it.
Okay, and if we limited it to the 8 feet, is that individual going to have the engineering and wind load and everything in that situation too?
For an 8-foot fence, yes. Anything over 6 feet.
So the 6-foot fence that allows no blockage. Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, I have a couple for staff. If you look at lines 76 and 77, it talks about opacity. Help me understand how opacity is determined, especially when you're using percentages like a 50%. Who determines it and how is that determined?
This is something we struggled with in writing this ordinance, and we tried to come up with something that at least could be evaluated. And 50%, you can tell if 50% of the fence is see-through or not. You could measure it theoretically. It depends on how it is. But we tried to come up with a threshold that was easy to evaluate. There is no perfect measure of opacity, and this is something we definitely struggled with in this ordinance.
City
I
Attorney.
could weigh in on this. When we were looking at this section of the ordinance, this was something I was concerned about. We've talked about this with opacity of screening, but in researching fence materials, I found that they're actually sold sometimes with opacity ratings. Like you can buy 85% opaque material. So unlike trying to test the opacity of living screening, how opaque is the bush? You can actually, as Nicole said, measure the pickets versus the open spaces, and a lot of these materials are sold with that information on the packaging.
I was unaware of that. Thank you. Thank you for that. If you look at line 106, it's talking about the wind load requirements, and once it's installed, a fence must remain in compliance with these wind load requirements. So let's say today, and I'm not an engineer or building code official, but let's say today the wind load requirement is that it has to withstand 100 miles an hour. But in 2 years, they say, no, that wind load, it must now be able to withstand 120 miles an hour. Does that mean all the old fences that were approved at 100 now must be in compliance with 120?
No, it would be the wind load requirements at the time they were built. It would essentially be the same non-conforming situation that
Okay, because it says once installed,
Mhm.
so that means that the fence has been approved, it's been permitted based on the current wind loads. A fence must remain in compliance with wind load requirements.
Right, and the wind load requirements are set out in here to withstand winds of at least 150 miles per hour. So we would have to come back and change that portion of the code in order to change that.
Say that again?
We would have to come back and, like, it wouldn't change on its own. It's written into the ordinance. So we would come back and if we wanted to
So if
change
state
what wind load
statute,
requirements it has to be in compliance with.
statute changes, then we have to come back and change our ordinance?
Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. There's another clause on that. It says whichever's higher with the Florida Building Code.
Only, we'd have to change if they lowered it. If they were to raise it, no, we don't have to.
So a fence or more than 6 feet must be designed to withstand winds of 150 miles an hour, or the minimum wind speed permitted by Florida Building Code.
Whichever is higher.
Yeah, yeah, you are.
So I'm just trying to prevent, if this proceeds, from us having to remember that they changed the code, that we have to then change our code. I'm just wondering if we could make it easy for future commissions and staff and everybody to just do something different instead of hard and true that we have to then change if state statute changes.
I'm trying to think of how else we could.
All right, so I'll let you all think about that one, and then I'll move on. I am concerned about, and it's my understanding that you would be allowed to put an 8-foot fence in the front yard.
Yes.
Okay. Has the police,
Yes.
yes?
As long as it's 15 feet setback from the
As
road.
long as it's 15 feet set back from the property line, they could put a 8-foot fence. Okay, it could be a vinyl fence, it could be, has the police department or fire department weighed in on their ability to render life safety aid? Especially because some of the lot lines, 15 feet, you could be right up on somebody's home.
We did reach out to both departments. We didn't get any substantive feedback one way or the other. They didn't have any issues with it.
No issues?
No.
But they're both walking up in case you'd like to ask them directly.
Yeah. I mean, if they're trying to fight a fire and they have to wiggle and worm the,
They'll just take it down.
well, that's bringing me to my next question.
Of course.
No, it's not.
Scott Titus with Fire Rescue District. Yeah, so typically in that situation, exactly that. If the fence is in our way, we're going to take it down.
They'll come down?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it goes to then line 160. If the fire department or police department takes it down, we have protections for road and drainage saying that it's the property owner's sole responsibility, but I don't see any protections for fire or police where it's the homeowner's sole responsibility to replace if they choose to.
So I will tell you, in most situations, for fire rescue, anyway, in most situations, we take something down or do something if for not very much money. If we can replace it and put it back up, we have tools to take that stuff down. Terry Gilson, who's our trades worker, a lot of times just, and it's not a requirement, but a lot of times we'll go out and just help put that back in place as a public service. I can tell you that most of the time, if there's a fire of any consequence at a house, the least thing they're worried about is their fence. We help them get settled back into the house if they can. We work on getting the property boarded back up. We do all those things with the homeowner, and if helping them get the fence back up is something we can do, certainly will help that. For the most part, we really haven't had an issue, but it's legit.
And you're right on, because there really wouldn't be an issue with the fire department. But if the police department has to use the Bearcat to get through the fence, to get through the front door, who's responsible for those repairs?
The way it works now is it's mitigated through our risk management. It's documented and mitigated through risk.
So the city would be responsible for those repairs?
Well, that's different department. However they mitigate that, I'm not
Yes,
sure.
Ultimately, just like if they break a front door down to go in, we are on the hook for certain items.
But road and drainage isn't.
Well, road and drainage,
If you go
There's-
to
Well, these provisions are when if there's a fence that's erected in our easement.
Okay.
So this is an area that
So
we
it's
have a right to use. And the ordinance says, listen, you can erect a fence
I
there. But
understand
if we
now the
need to use it,
difference.
we're getting in there.
Perfect, thank you. I do now understand the difference. One was easement for road and drainage, whereas this is on private property. Thank you for that clarification. I just have, I believe, on line 170, it says that there should be no impediment to the city's ability to access the utilities above or below ground. So what if they get approval to put a fence up in the easement and they do damage to maybe piping or anything like that? Who's responsible for that?
If they put a fence up and damage our utilities, they're responsible for it.
Just making sure, just asking for clarification. Commissioner Carrison, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, only line 199, where it talks about the whenever practicable, the city will attempt to provide advance written notice of termination of the property owner. And this is only if the Public Works Department, that the fence is needed for any purpose. I think that needs to be a requirement, that if they plan on using that easement for any purpose, there needs to be some sort of 90-day written requirement that's going to allow them to understand. If it's an emergency, I can understand that, but if it's just that, oh, we need to run a drainage canal or something, that's totally different. I think it needs to be differentiated.
That's why we use the language whenever practicable in case of an emergency. But you could also include a specific timeline requirement in there. And then if it's not practicable, due to an emergency or some other impending basis.
Can we find the appropriate wording for that while we're still discussing that? I mean, I don't know how, I want it to be, if an emergency issue, that it can be removed without notice. But any other, if it's a planned, say they plan on creating a drainage, it shouldn't be without a 90-day notice that they know that that fence has to be taken down. And it's their responsibility to pay to take it down, not the city's.
If that's part of the motion, we can bring that back to second reading. Come up with the language.
Okay, and I think, yeah.
Yes, ma'am, we can definitely get with Nicole and her staff about that. We typically, when it's an emergency, we try the best we can to get with the homeowner. But most definitely on anything routine or planned, we always have written notices, so that's definitely not a problem.
Thank you. Because, you guys aren't all going to be around here someday, and we want to
So,
make sure.
Do you want to get a consensus to have staff come up with
I
other?
think it's got to be in the ordinance. Like, when we read it for second reading.
That's what I'm trying to get a consensus for you for.
Okay.
To have staff come back with new language about this whenever practicable. Get a consensus, Commissioner Emmerich?
Yes.
Person? Yep. I'm a yes.
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 All right, and then let's get one more consensus before the motion about the staff coming up with new language regarding the 150 miles an hour and Florida Building Code somewhere around lines 101 to come up with different language to prevent us having to keep our memory banks active. Can I get a consensus, Commissioner Hanks?
Sure.
Vice Mayor?
I'm not really for it because it states or higher, so I think the way that it's worded feels it.
Yes, Commissioner Pearson?
So just so I'm clear, you want it clarified that the person would be pretty much exempt unless, they're pretty much exempt. If the law changes, that they won't have to go back and change their fence if they've already, it'll become a non-conforming, correct?
I think that was
That's what you're trying to clarify.
understood, but actually, you brought up something, there might be two consensuses we need to do here. One of them is that last sentence, because it says, once installed, a fence must remain in compliance with wind load requirements. So if they change, they have to change their fencing.
Okay, that's
That's
what
what
I
I'm
thought.
understanding,
Yeah,
correct?
that's what I thought.
So we probably need to get that language also changed.
I'll work with the building official to go over recommendation from that would be how we would handle that, and we'll come back with that.
Okay, so maybe we'll just get a consensus to have them work through 5A, lines 101 through 107, to come up with clarifying language. Okay,
To that, talking about that last line, I can agree.
so Commissioner Hanks, and I'm a yes myself. Commissioner Emmerich?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so I see no other further questions, comments, or anything, so let's move on to a motion.
I will move to continue ordinance number 2019-15 for second reading on January 28th, 2020, with the following amendments to clarify Section 5 design requirements, that to be clear throughout the entire Section 5A and allow for a grandfathering of sorts if the code and wind speed is to change, as well as Section 8, I believe that is?
Yeah,
8B triple I, or to be clear, line 197, 96, to redo the language to allow a 90-day notice when a planned use for the occupied area of the occupied fence or any other use, as long as it's not an emergency, a 90-day notice. And I believe that's the last one, right? That's it, just those two.
I have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
A motion on the floor by Commissioner Carusone, as stated, to continue the ordinance with the two consensuses, and seconded by Commissioner Hanks. Anything to that, Commissioner Carusone?
It has taken a long time for this, a year. I'm still a little disappointed in the front yard part that, but I understand the line of sight and the safety issues, so I think that this is a great compromise for some of the concerns that we ran through in the first two meetings. I think that there was a lot of give and take on both the staff side as well as the commission side and the community side, because there was a time when you could put 6-foot, 8-foot fences up on a lot line and there was no problem whatsoever. It was always an understanding, in fact, we have it in written agreements, that if you have to take that fence down, it's not our problem, it's basically yours. So we've done it before. We've not had a problem to date. In fact, we have had serious wildfires where fences have come down, and those peoples and those properties have had to put their own fences back up. So it's something that has happened before. Furthermore, I think that, you know, we continue to create these obstacles that make it unrealistic for people who just want to live, work, and play in the city. And we keep creating all these burdens upon them, be it sheds or fences or just basic, simple needs that people want and desire. And, you know, this, again, I go back to, this is a great compromise, because I think that we have looked at the safety, the quality of life on one hand, as well as making sure that our residents have the ability to do what they want in their own yard. And if they do go outside of that boundary, then it's a different story. So I think that you guys did a wonderful job on this. I know it was tough. It's tough to do something where it kind of goes against what you want to see, but you did a great job considering that. So I want to thank you for that.
Commissioner Luke, I'm sorry. Commissioner Hanks seconded it, please. Anything to it?
I think government historically has a history of regulating people out of ownership. And, you know, I think, as Commissioner Carusone said, you know, people just want to live their lives. They want to be able to live it the way they want to live it. They own the property. They want to be able to do this, you know, relatively what they want to do within their property. And I thank staff for coming together on something like this, because I recognize, as Commissioner Carusone said, this isn't something, that your end of it really looks at like, oh my gosh, yeah, let's open this up this way. So I do greatly appreciate it. And it was more than just one member. It was, there were many members. But, whenever I look at it, I also look at it as a property rights issue. I also want to state that, I appreciate our PZAB board taking a look at this. Just because we don't always agree with one of our advisory boards does not mean that we don't appreciate the work that they've done and the advice that they've given. Sometimes we just don't, sometimes we just don't see it the same way. But they have a duty and they have a diligence that they do for us, and I greatly appreciate that, everything that they do. And so thank you to our PZAB board, thank you to staff, and there we go.
Commissioner Luke, you have your light on?
I do. I like what the ordinance is doing. Personally, myself, I would like to see a height limit of 9 or 10 feet instead of going all the way up to potentially 14 feet. If it is even a 6-foot height, and then to have 3 or 4 feet to block the house, that would be a 9 to a 10 foot. So I actually would like to see a limit of less than that 14 placed upon it.
Is that all you have?
It
Vice Mayor?
is.
Seeing no other comments, I will weigh in on this. Staff doesn't recommend this. They have stated in at least 3 occasions how it does not even, they can't conclude that it goes with our comp plan. PZAB did not approve of this 4-1. I can never agree to having an 8-foot fence in a front yard. We have some property standards. We have this uniformity, and to have one house have a 14-foot fence and another house have a 8-foot fence and another house have, it's not property standards. And in my opinion, I think we're going to be creating a whole bunch of unintended consequences. I understand everybody has the right to their property, so my neighbor can put up a 14-foot fence. Where's my right to my property? I'm not going to have free reign of air movement. I'm not going to have light coming into my property because my neighbor put up a fence. So where's my, and I'm just saying mine, theoretically as a conversation, where is my right to property? So I have some serious issues with these unintended consequences, and for that I will not be voting for this. So seeing no other comments, we will call the question. And that passed 3-2 with myself and Commissioner Luke dissenting. Commissioner Luke, do you have reasons for your dissent?
The only reason, because I don't mind a fence going around a home, that's privacy. And I don't have an issue with a fence surrounding a home. I just, again, have a problem with that height. I would like to have seen it at a lower height. Thank you.
And to summarize my reasons for dissent is it's not fitting our comp plan. Staff is not in favor of this. Our PZAB board is not in favor of this. And I just cannot agree to having an 8-foot fence in the front yard or a 14-foot fence along somebody's property. So moving on to second reading. City Clerk, we're going to start with the ordinance 2019-50 for the fire rescue conformity with Florida state statutes.
Can I ask a question?
I'm sorry? About this item or the previous item?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Can we, is there going to be a bunch of questions on these? Because if so, can we just combine them all for discussion?
I think we're.
And then take action separately?
I don't
You
think
we're
we
good?
had any
Okay.
conversation the first time
I just
around.
wanted to make sure. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I don't remember conversation the first time around, so I don't see there being conversation the second.
Okay, thank you.
City Clerk, if you could read by title only, please.
Number 2019-50, an ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, amending the code of the City of Northport, Florida to bring meeting notice and advertisement requirements of the Fire Rescue District into conformity with Florida statutes by amending Chapter 66, Special Districts, Article 2, Northport Fire Rescue District, Section 66-33 meetings, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing an effective date.
City Manager, second reading.
Yes, yes, Mayor, and as you were correct, there wasn't really any comments on any one of the three of these items. So with that, I'm just going to turn it back over to you.
All righty. Seeing no lights on, I will entertain a motion.
Ordinance number 2019-50 as presented.
Second.
Motion on the floor for 2019-50 as presented for second reading by Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Carrison. Anything to that? Call to question. And that passed unanimously, 5-0. Moving on to ordinance number 2019-51, and this one is for road and drainage, conforming with state statutes. City Clerk, if you would please read by title only.
Ordinance number 2019-51, an ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, amending the code of the City of Northport, Florida to provide consistency and to bring meeting notice and advertisement requirements of the Road and Drainage District into conformity with Florida statutes by amending Chapter 66, Special Districts, Article 3, Road and Drainage District, Section 66-51, Governing Body, and Section 66-60, Meetings, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing an effective date.
I think I'll just move on to a motion unless somebody wants
I
to
move
speak.
to approve ordinance number 2019-51 as presented.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Carrison. Seeing nothing to this, I'll call the question. And that passed 5-0. Moving on to ordinance number 2019-52, and this is bringing in solid wastes into conformity with state statutes. City Clerk, please read by title only.
Ordinance number 2019-52, an ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, amending the code of the City of Northport, Florida to provide consistency and to bring meeting notice and advertisement requirements of the solid waste district into conformity with Florida statutes by amending Chapter 66, Special Districts, Article 4, Solid Waste District, Section 66-86, Section 66-87, and Section 66-94, and by creating Section 66-97, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, City Clerk.
I move to approve ordinance number 2019-52 as presented, and I thank the clerk for bringing these forward.
Motion made by Vice Mayor and seconded by Commissioner Carrison. Seeing nothing to the motion, I'll call the question. And that passes 5-0. Moving on to ordinance number 2019-53. This is second reading for the dissolution of the Beautification and Tree Scenic Highway Committee. City Clerk, please read by title only.
Ordinance number 2019-53, an ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, amending the code of the City of Northport, Florida related to advisory boards by repealing in its entirety Chapter 4, Article 5, entitled the Beautification and Tree Scenic Highway Committee, by amending Section 4-182 regarding the powers and duties of the Environmental Advisory Board, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. City Manager, did you want to speak to this item?
I know that you all have received some emails on this lately. This was the second reading. I did want to address that I know at least one of the emails talked about being able to be part of Tree City USA. We would still meet the requirements for that. We do have a city arborist. It doesn't require that you actually have a board. You need to have pretty much either. There's a little more detail about that, but having an arborist assigned to protect trees does meet that definition, so that if the commission decides to approve this second reading, it won't impact the Tree City USA designation.
Thank you for that, City Manager. Do we have any public comment on this, Vice Mayor?
We do one.
At this time, I'd like to call Alice White for a public comment.
Hi, Alice White. I'm just really stymied that you would consider removing any citizen advisory board. I mean, it's really the one of the avenues that people have to be of the government. And it is designated in Chapter 45 as the advisory board to counsel all of you on all matters relating to trees. It's really the one of the avenues that people have to be of the government. And it is designated in Chapter 45 as the advisory board to counsel all of you on all matters relating to trees. It's really the one of the avenues that people have to be of the government. And it is designated in Chapter 45 as the advisory board to counsel all of you on all matters relating to trees. I contacted some of the previous members of, that served on the board, and they never even knew that. They never even knew that, that was one of their main functions, was to advise you on all matters relating to trees. Also, I was, this is just out of the blue for me. None of you contacted me. I mean, you know I've been passionate about trees for decades, and yet nobody said, hey, Alice, nobody's on the board, or we don't really have a lot of members. Can you rally the troops? And I submitted an application last week, and I think a couple other people did. But I just don't understand what's the haste in doing this. And when I went back and looked at the minutes from 2018, and they had a regular meetings in 2018. They ran into trouble this year. Yes, I think they were down to 3 members. That was this year. 1 year you had trouble. As a recently retired school teacher, my response would be, well, what interventions were taken? What strategies were put in place to maybe make it more successful? I don't think you did your due diligence to say, hey, let's step up to the plate. I know you announced the vacancies at the beginning of the meetings. I know it's been on Facebook, but if that's not working, you need to move on to something else. And again, as a former teacher, this is what I would be told all the time. It's not enough to say, I'm doing this, it's not working. If the board wasn't being successful, what was being done to help them be successful? The meetings weren't night meetings, and I know that when there wasn't a quorum, you'd be notified. Until recently, I served on the Tax Oversight Committee, which never was able to meet this year. We set up a night meeting, and we were going to go to that, and then I was told 2 days before people couldn't make it now. So they know in advance when there's not going to be a meeting. So, and it would be one thing if this was a night meeting and staff showed up and nobody was there, but it was a day meeting. And even if it did cost money, again, it's an opportunity for citizens to be involved in their community. And I just don't understand why you would just eliminate that. I know the talk has been to carry this over into the Environmental Advisory Board, but that board was to supplement and to take care of all the other environmental issues that were coming up. So I just really hope you could reconsider this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alice. I have 2 more cards that came in. Ms. Nancy Fisher.
If having an advisory board on trees is not a requirement of the Arbor Day Foundation, it should be. I'm just flabbergasted at the way the city works or fails to work with their boards. Having come from local government, having come from state government, I understand the robust nature that can occur between advisory boards and that kind of citizen input and the decisions that is then made at the municipal level. I highly encourage you to look at how you have created these boards. I know that I've looked at some of the qualifications, and I'm nearly 30 years in economic development, and yet I do not qualify to sit on your economic development board. And the reason why I do not, or I would as a citizen, but based on my experience, I do not. So, what is the structure of your boards? How are you structured? How do you interrelate to your boards? Do your boards feel validated? Do they feel as though they're providing significant input to the commission and helping make a difference? If you don't make people feel as though they're valuable and you don't make them feel as though they're contributing, they say, I'd rather stay home and watch Breaking Bad on TV. So I really encourage you, rather than abolishing a valuable asset to the city of Schenectady, you can tell where I came from, city of Northport, that you look at how this committee has been used and how it can better serve your needs and better serve the needs of the city of Northport. And I encourage you to do that before you throw the baby out with the bathwater and you don't have a recourse and a need in the future. So don't abolish it.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Mr. English.
I would like to reiterate what the last speakers did. She's dead on. Most of your boards and committees feel they're totally, let's even go another way. I'm a former member and chairman of Planning and Zoning Advisory Board.
State your name, please, for the
Oh,
record.
William English, Northport.
Thank you.
And I've also been a representative on Parks and Recreation. That was a while ago, but the same type of structures and lack of utilizations of the boards is nothing really new, okay? But over the years, I've noticed, speaking to members of the boards, as you know, I'm related to environmental issues, they feel that they're not utilized to their greatest potential and that the commission doesn't seek out that potential. And there's where the greatest deal is. I'll give you a couple examples. I asked a member of the P&Z board the other day if they're going to have workshops as it relates to the Unified Land Development Code. He stated that they don't have that authority. I believe that the chairman has the authority to call a board to have workshops. Now, I could be wrong. I wish somebody checked that for me. The other issue I have is that the Environmental Advisory Board at one point brought forth a citizen recommendation, or in the board, a board member's recommendation, of instituting a citizen science water quality testing for our canals and waterways, okay? This is a program that's already in place in other areas, and it was met with very cool reception, okay? And these are the type of things that these boards have the ability to provide. There are outside entities and groups and organizations that want to help. You're just not asking them to help. And staff is not facilitating that help. So all I'm trying to say is that this appears to be a done deal. And I just want you to understand the focus and the frustration of many, many members of your boards. Not just your pet boards, but all your boards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. English. All right, Commissioner Luke, question?
No, not really questions. I mean, I'm the one that brought this forward. This isn't a hidden agenda by staff. This isn't anything Mr. Lear came up with. It's not affiliated with a tree fund. And personally, I think this board has really placed a greater value on the boards this past year than past commissions have done for quite a while. During strategic planning and budgeting, we made sure that each of those boards brought presentations and were able to give recommendations to us. We have interacted with them. We built 2 other brand new boards because we care about those types of things. We are not wanting to diminish any advocacy for trees. If somebody doesn't know by now that we stand here on this dais for the environment, they haven't been paying attention. This is giving more of a protection. That board not only got down to 3, but they got down to 1 member. And the recommendation to combine the 2 actually came from a previous member of the Beautification and Tree Committee. And my brain started working with that, looking at the opportunities to place the advocacy of trees with an active, vibrant board that was already doing the work, and the one that was failing really wasn't doing the duty. As was stated by a public commenter, they didn't even know what their full duties were. We don't sit on these boards in order to make sure that they know what they're charged to do. It appears to me this Beautification and Tree Committee was focusing only on 41 because I believe the boards were combined at a previous date and time. So they were looking at landscaping and the irrigation. I've been in and out of the meetings of that Beautification Committee and the environmental for, well, the beautification since 2015, and then the new one on and off since it was developed. So I know what goes on within those meetings. I've heard it, and the focus was on 41 and the landscaping. We've not heard anything from them in regards to the tree ordinance, the ULDC that we're trying to work on. They've not had the input. There, to my knowledge, was no report really by them for this year's strategic planning and budgeting. And so I think the protection is better served for trees by being with this new board, and they can have a separate task force or group within there who focuses on the trees. I would rather see the arborist being the liaison for the environmental group and establishing, because sometimes there's issues with various liaisons going in and out. I think putting the higher level arborist within the environmental board would be advantageous to this combining also. We announced over and over, that was one of the things that this commission tried to do, was get our boards built up. And we sat up here and thought of many ways to try to get the word out, to get these boards more active. I think they have succeeded in most all of those boards over this past year. We can't make people come serve. And if people were interested in the trees, why weren't they on the board? I mean, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So and as far as Chapter 45, legal has come back and stated all you have to do is change from one committee to the other, and it fulfills those duties. In the original discussion that we had, that's what the intent was doing, just swinging the charge of the trees to that committee, and that's what I wanted to speak about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Carrison.
Mayor, real quick, my button is not working to be able to tell you that I would like to speak, so after Commissioner Carousel, can I speak? It's not working at all.
Nothing's working? Great.
Screen is frozen.
First of all, have we, do board members, maybe this is for Heather, I'm not real sure, but do board members receive an initial, like at the initial meeting or acceptance what their duties are?
They receive a whole packet, and it has in there the ordinance that created the board and any following ordinances after that.
Okay. Currently, is the arborist the actual liaison for the Tree and Beautification Committee? Who is the liaison?
It's George. George and David, I believe they're both handling it.
Yes.
Arborist number 2.
Okay. Do we have members now that Ms. White knows about it, and I understand that she's submitted, so do we have enough number?
We have one who is currently on the board, and then we've received 2 applications.
Okay. So if I may, Mayor, can I ask Ms. White a question?
I have no problem with it. Ms. White will have to come up.
I mean,
This is highly irregular.
well, we've done it before, so.
Do you mind answering questions,
No, I
Ms. White?
don't. I
Thank you.
don't.
And by the way, first let me apologize, because you're right. We should have made a call. We should have said, hey, Alice, please, whatever you do, make some phone calls and get this thing filled. So I will apologize for not really putting 2 and 2 together. I was told that it's because, one, we have not been able to get enough applicants to have a quorum, which has been a problem, and that there was an overlapping type of responsibility between the 2 boards, the environmental and the tree board. So this is kind of why it's moved forward, just to give you a kind of a update there. But do you think that you could get that membership to a quorum and consistent, and if you have to change night meetings, somehow, some way, so that it's survivable, and we give it another 6 months to see if it can reach its, capacity and actually go forward with what the ordinance was intended? Do you think you could do that?
I think it's worth the effort, and I think, yes, the fact that this is why I was never I'm just completing my first year of retirement.
I thought you were gonna
That's why I'm
retire.
here.
You're so
but
funny.
A 1 o'clock meeting was
Yeah.
not doable. And I know that people that I know, they're still working and that's not doable for them. So yes, that could be a factor in that. That the EAB meets at night and that's really good. That's one of the reasons why they have a lot of more members. They have people who work during the day and they can still make that meeting. So I think it's worth an effort at least.
I appreciate that because I've never had a board work during the day either. I don't know how anyone gets quorums through that, but thank you very much.
Okay.
So let me ask, my next question is to maybe, who would I ask this to? I guess city clerk? Do you think it's possible to hold off on this action for 6 months to make sure that we do get that quorum and consistency? And then kind of the part B of that question is in the ordinance the requirement that meets at 1 o'clock, or can we change it? I don't know where the meeting time is set in stone, so is there a way to make it more accessible for the working class, considering that is the majority of our residents here that definitely care about?
I believe it's the same as the other boards where they set their schedule at the
Okay,
beginning of the year.
I just wanted to make sure this wasn't any different than any of the other boards. Okay, so then the schedule can be set differently. And then, is there any legal issue to maybe holding off on this for 6 months until the board can be reestablished?
If it were the will of the commission, this could be continued for 6 months. I would recommend that due to the elapsed time, we re-advertise before it came back for an additional reading.
Okay, all right. And then just some general questions, I'm sorry. First is that, haven't we found different ways to market for the boards? City manager, do you have kind of any other update on that? Because I know that we did, as Commissioner Luke had mentioned, Vice Mayor Luke had mentioned, is that we have taken a lot of direction to the city manager on how to get these boards more active and more filled. So what, do you have any kind of summary as to what we've done so far?
I do with all of our boards, when they have significant longstanding vacancies, we advertise them. They're obviously mentioned at all of these meetings. Every time there's vacancies or even upcoming vacancies, the city clerk announces them at every meeting that we have. We put it out on social media. In some instances, we've even taken out ads in the newspaper to ask people to serve on them, short of going door to door to knock. There's not a whole lot more that we can do. Obviously, the door-to-door statement is kind of just for humor, but we don't want to, as staff, specifically try to cherry pick who's on these, because these are the commission's advisory boards. But we do try to publicly get the word out, and we have.
Remember when we talked about having the problem with the getting the teens on those boards? Did we ever go to the schools like we had discussed?
We have sent information to all of the schools, yes.
I just want to make sure. I just don't know if there's a way to kind of reach out with different boards to do, like, for instance, I'm sure that there's some sort of environmental, like the tree, the People for Trees. I mean, if we sent something to Alice, or, and let's just pretend it's not Alice, it's a different president, and we said, we have this tree committee that is needing people on it, couldn't we go to different organizations and kind of try to reach out that way?
From a staff perspective, we try to avoid going to specific organizations so that it's not looked at us cherry picking the people who are on this. That would be a commission decision.
Okay, no, I was just trying to think of different, more creative ways to find membership, but then the other thing is that we used to have joint meetings with the boards themselves when they gave their summary. Every year they did their annual report, and the joint meeting would kind of, I don't know, it did create a more cohesive kind of a little bit more respected and environment that we actually took what they had to say, less lightly, really. And I wonder if we shouldn't bring something back like that versus just a summary sheet at the end of the year, because I think it does add to how they feel, that they're being listened to, and it also allows that communication back and forth. So what are you thinking?
Well, right now, they have that option. What they're required to do annually is either present to the commission at a commission meeting, or provide a report to the staff liaison or member of their committee or board to the commission. So,
Yeah, we used to have actual joint special meetings where we do all of the boards in 1 hour, you got it, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. So it
And
was
this is-
one special meeting.
yeah, a previous commission set the policy that annually in the first quarter of every calendar year, they must provide either, like I said, a presentation or a report. And it is at their discretion. And if they want the joint meeting or they want to come and present to you all, we can schedule that. Most of your boards prefer just to send you all a report.
Okay, I don't know if, I didn't know if they knew that or not. Okay.
They're all told.
And then the next thing is there a way that if we have, when you get your agenda, well, I guess we're so far ahead in our agenda items, is there a way to kind of designate that this could go before a board, or that's already done? So for instance, if you have an agenda item we know that we're going to see in, say, 3 months, 6 months, and you think it would fit within a volunteer board or one of our advisory boards, you already dedicate that this should be heard from X board, and then it
On the ones that are required to be, yes.
only required.
Only required,
Okay.
because again, they're the commission's boards. If you all want us to send an item back to one of your boards, we'll certainly do that, but again,
That's up to us.
that's up to you all.
Okay, that's good to know.
You almost done?
Yep.
Awesome.
In a second. And then the other thing that we used to do that I think there's merit to is the board recognition celebrations. Every year, we would have all of the volunteer boards and their members get together. We would have cake and punch and sandwiches from Publix, and we'd give out their certificates for the year. And I think that we should go back to doing something like that because it was special. It was for those volunteers that served on the advisory boards. And you celebrated their volunteerism because they gave a lot of hours. And I think that we gave them, little pins for the year that had the crazy osprey looking pin, and then went on to different pins. So, I mean, I think that there's merit in something like that, to do a celebration every year just for our board members. So, and with that, I'm going to close on my questions and comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Emmerich, since you stated that your name was overlooked, I'll let you go ahead first, please.
No, I was just saying, because the thing was stuck. It's fixed now. Commissioner Carasone asked and answered a lot of questions for me, because I'm pretty much on the same page that she is. This is for the clerk. What time does the environmental board meet? What time is that?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Is that the latest in the evening when any board meets?
I think we have one at 6:30. Parks
Okay.
and Rec.
My question is getting off of work, getting here, because I know 1 o'clock is very detrimental to the working class. And back in the day, and Alice can remember this, most of the people that were on this board were retired. And I think that was the people that had the John Ray and wanted to do this. So it was basically hand-formed for that, and in times need to change. So I'm completely on board with keeping this going, keeping it working, giving them time to rebuild, changing the schedule to where it is participatable, if that's even a word, to where the community can get together and grow this board. So I'm in favor of not combining the two and keeping it separate and see where we go from there. That's all I had. Thank you, Commissioner Carousel.
Thank you for your patience, Commissioner Hanks. I
No,
appreciate that. Your turn.
Yeah, in some of the emails that I received, I did state that I felt, that, especially if members are beginning to apply for this, that it might be in haste. But I also want to iterate that it is important, and it is the responsibility of these boards to communicate their needs. It's a chair's responsibility to manage a board, to motivate the board. And if things are not going right, it's that responsibility. If the time ends up too early folks apply understanding the time. So if it becomes a problem, then it is that board's responsibility to come to the commission and make a recommendation as an advisory board to advise us and say, the time isn't working, we're having a hard time keeping members, we have a lot of absences, these things are taking place. It might be better if we could move this towards the evening time, of which I don't know a single member of this board that would not say, hey, whatever helps you do business better. I think this is an evidence that sometimes complacency causes things like this to take place. And it's an area that, we have some solid folks that have solid cares and values towards our ecology and towards our trees, and I think that is a very important factor. I would love to see, and I don't know how active people for trees were with the board, but I'd love to see them be a very active part and participant with our Tree and Beautification Advisory Board. I mean, I have hammered some of our businesses for not participating in our Economic Development Board, because they'll come and they'll complain. Listen, we need both sides of this fence. We need, whenever we're talking trees, I want businesses there to give their point of view as to what might affect them. When we have business development going on, I want the people for trees there giving their point of view. But if when we talk about the environment and trees, and businesses don't show up, well, then don't come complain to me because you're not getting something that is working for you, and vice versa. So, I would be on board with keeping this for another 6 months, especially if this has kind of stirred up a little bit of rejuvenation. It's rejuvenated some folks, and I think it's good. I think having a board like this is a phenomenal thing. I mean, I need this side of the fence. This is the side of the fence that I need. I love, just so you know, I love nature. It is I'm always jungling up my yard, maybe not everything you would want me to. I like my little things, but I try to use natural stuff and stuff that go with the state of Florida. But that being said, I also believe in development and I believe in those things. So I need those sides of the fence to help balance me, and so I think it's important to have. So I would be for keeping this board for another 6 months to see how it goes, as things have been stated, as long as we continue to have members to do this. But if you don't have a quorum, you don't have a board, and that was kind of the direction that this board was going. So, thank you.
Seeing no other speakers, I gotta say, there's nothing like the talk of disbanding something to get everybody's feathers ruffled. And Miss Alice, I do apologize to you because we should have contacted you, but at the same time, I personally thought it was about planting trees on 41. I was unaware of the rest of it until I went and did my research on how this board was actually formed. And it has had many transformations since 1995, from tree council to beautification and tree council to highway scenic. Gosh, the name itself is horrible. So my apologies to you for that. City Manager, I do have one question, and I don't know if you can answer it or if you know of anybody that might be here to be able to answer it. What does the Beautification Tree Scenic Highway Committee do for the Florida Scenic Highway Program?
I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head. I apologize. I don't believe we have anybody
Something
here.
that I just recently learned, that we in the materials is they were to participate in the Florida Scenic Highway Program.
Mayor, the code provision, 4-140B, provides that the committee shall recommend grants to apply for and other sources of funding to accomplish the goals of the Florida Scenic Highway Program.
Okay. With that said, we could shorten that up and say that the board should be looking for grants. We don't have to be specific. I also firmly believe that we need to keep this board in place. Based on the research that I did, the emails that I received. And this is why having second readings on things is really, really important, because we get to have more time. If we were to keep this for 6 more months, which it seems like to be the will of the board based on conversation I'm hearing, I personally think we need to change the title. The title does us no justice. It doesn't explain what the board's responsibilities are. And I guarantee you, if we just had the title of this advisory board be the Tree Advisory Board, we would have no problem filling those problems. So I think we need to just keep it simple, go back to its roots, the Tree Council, the Tree Advisory Board. You will get a lot more people involved because it's clear as mud what the responsibilities are of this board. So I really think that we should look at keeping this board and even just changing the name of the board. I think 6 months, we're going to have no problems. I think maybe we should just scratch this disbanding right now, have the city attorney work on changing the name of the board, have our communications team work on getting members for the Tree Advisory Board, or whatever it is we want to call it. And I think we're going to solve the problems very, very quickly. We don't even need to revisit this in 6 months, and that's my opinion. So after we do the vote, I do have another separate but related subject on this regarding the advisory boards. So at this point, Commissioner Emmerich, I see your light is on.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add is over the next 6 months, once they get together, they can figure out their parameters. They might be able to come up with a name and a suggestion and work together like it's a brand-new board. Let's let them decide what's going forward and give them the power to bring to us, and let's work together with them. That's, just wanted to put that out there. Oops, that's it.
Commissioner Caruso?
Yeah. First, I'm going to go ahead and go forward with the motion.
I have other lights on before you start your motion. Commissioner Luke? Vice Mayor Luke?
I love hearing the breath of fresh air for this committee. Wish it could have come about before this past year when it was failing, and the members who spent all their time on the committee felt like it was a waste of time. So I wish it could have come sooner, but later is better than never. So I'll be in agreement for a 6-month review of this, and we'll see if we can get some people who are advocates for trees to actually sit on the committee and do the due diligence of Chapter 45. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Caruso?
Yeah, city attorney, if we were to do this, what would be the appropriate wording? Move to postpone first reading till July, or?
So I've heard two different ideas from the board. If what you would like to do is to continue this ordinance until a certain time, then that would be the language. That would be for a third reading, and we can't have a second reading. I heard another idea to kind of rework the board, to rework the title and some of the duties, and I believe that we would need to do that in a separate ordinance.
Okay, so what I'll do is I will move to continue the ordinance number 2019-53 to a third reading at the last meeting in July, to allow members to be found and submitted, and to allow that membership to determine what would be the best meeting time, goals and objectives, as well as a renaming of their committee.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Carusone to continue this to third reading in July, and the other items that she stated. Seconded by Vice Mayor. Anything to that, Commissioner Carusone?
Yeah, I think it kind of encompasses everything that we've been discussing. The meeting times are an issue. The goals and objectives are very flimsy at best, and I think that we're underutilizing this particular board, which will also take away that buy-in that you need for someone to be passionate about it. So I think that what Commissioner Emmerich had said about allowing them to create their own goals, objectives, their name, so on and so forth, and then have us review that. I think that's a perfect way to get the buy-in, to allow them to create a new passion for what this board can do. And I think that and by not just saying, we're just going to allow it to sit as it is, this will remind us as well in July that we need to make sure that we're cognizant of the fact that this board has had struggles, and are we on level with not just this board, but all of our others. So I think that by continuing it, that's the best way, so that it's reminding ourselves, not just, that's it.
Vice Mayor?
I believe it's an opportunity for this board. I think they have the opportunity to prove the value of the board as well as the advocacy for trees. So, thank you.
Seeing no other lights on, I'll speak to the motion. The ordinance that's before us is to disband the Tree Beautification and Highway Scenic Committee. By telling the board, hey, we're going to revisit this ordinance to disband in July, is kind of setting them up to fail. I understand the rest of the motion is to have them work and come up with meeting times and goals and objectives, new meeting name, but why would we want to continue this ordinance? In my opinion, we should just kill this ordinance. Let the Tree Scenic Highway, whatever the heck their long name is, continue. Let them get their board members and their quorum, and then they can work with the rest of what Commissioner Carasone had said in the motion of reworking the meeting times, their goals, objectives. And we know to bring this back in July. But to continue this ordinance to July is to disband this ordinance in July. So, disband this advisory board in July. I don't want to set them up to fail. So for that reason, I cannot approve this motion. I can't vote in favor of this motion as it was stated. But I am all in favor of letting this beautification tree scenic highway thing continue and have them give us back information within 6 months. Now, maybe we can do an amendment to have them bring back information in 6 months, but to continue the ordinance, I cannot be in favor of. Commissioner Luke.
I don't see it as setting up to fail at all. Because right now, there's not enough, even with the 2 applications, there's not enough to even have a quorum. So they have the opportunity to show that it can be a success, and it can be just as active board as some of these other boards are with us. They can interact with us and we have joint meetings, we have reports, we have minutes, we have so much given to us from other boards that I would like to see them have the opportunity. But if that opportunity fails, we're right back to the same place that we are. So I am totally in agreement with the motion, so that, it can easily be done away with in July if they prove that this board is becoming the advocate that they need to be for trees. Because that was the motivation behind it, was to make sure that trees were being advocated for and the importance of them was being taken care of. So as long as they prove that, it would just go away in July. Thank you.
And Vice Mayor, I think we're all saying the same thing. It's just this ordinance is to disband. And I really believe, based on the emails we've had and the conversations that we've had even today, based on public comment, I don't see this board even needing to be disbanded. I think we have breathed a breath of fresh air into this entire board, and to have it come back for a 3rd reading to disband is where I'm saying we're setting them up to fail. So I agree. I'm getting there. Let's call the question. And that passed 4-1 with McDowell dissenting for reasons stated. It is 12:15. We definitely need a 15-minute break, and I think we'll be able to finish up in a timely manner. So we will be back at 12:30. Thank you.
We only
37, and we are back in session. Before we continue, I'll wait for comments. Let's go with the city manager. We're moving on to approve the water demand projections report.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, thank you, Mayor. Every year, we bring back to you an update to the 20-year projected water uses of what we're going to need from the Peace River. We have not increased our needs in this report, but we are required to present you all with what the 20-year demands will be. Utility staff is here if you have any questions on this item. If not, we'll just look forward for your approval.
Are they making a presentation or?
No, it's not really a presentation. It's just, this is an annual update.
Okay.
And since.
I didn't know if they wanted to make a presentation. They've been sitting here all morning, so.
They enjoy your
Is that what it is? All right.
I would be willing to listen.
So I'll get a consensus. Do you want to hear their presentation?
They didn't have one, did they? Isn't that what was just stated? There
Yeah.
wasn't one?
They don't have a formal presentation. They can give you information if you'd like it.
Okay.
But-
So if you have any questions? Anybody have any questions of staff on this item?
I can make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to
Vice Mayor?
approve year 8 of the 20-year projected water demand projections report.
Do I hear a second? I have a motion on the floor to approve the water demand projections report for year 8 by Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Emmerich. Anything to that?
Nope, thank you for doing what you do and keeping that steady. Appreciate it.
Let's call the question. Easy peasy. Thank you very much. That passed 4-0. All right, any further public comment?
None.
All right, moving on to commission communications. Commissioner Emmerich.
No.
Commissioner Carasone's not here, so Vice Mayor Luke.
I do not have anything.
Commissioner Hanks.
No, ma'am.
All right, I've got a couple of things. Number one, it has been brought to my attention, and I'm sharing it with the commission, and that some of the advisory boards are not having a regular liaison, that sometimes it's one liaison, then a meeting later, it's another liaison, so it's creating this instability within the advisory boards. And I'm just wondering, is this common practice, city manager, or do we as a board need to give direction to keep it one liaison?
To answer your question, no, it's not common practice. We have a liaison assigned. Unfortunately, sometimes sicknesses come up. We've had some people leave employment with the city. I'm unable to force them to come back and be the liaison when they no longer work here. But we do have assigned
This power is limited.
powers in my job description. But, no, we typically have either one or in some cases 2 liaisons assigned to a committee. A lot of times it depends on their other workload. For example, the Environmental Advisory Board, I know we have both of the arborists are assigned as liaisons. In the event that one has a workload that for the week has been more extensive than the others, they will switch out, but for the most part, no, we have a specific liaison assigned.
Okay, so maybe what's happening is just because this is flu season and,
Life gets in the way
yeah,
sometimes.
life does get in the way.
Beyond our control.
So hopefully this was like a one and done kind of thing and that things will be addressed. All right, so now here's an issue that I now have to bring up to the rest of the board, and I am a very visual person. And as the chair of this meeting, I personally had asked Commissioner Hanks not to wear his hat in the meeting because I have a very hard time seeing around it. So at this time, I'm going to formally ask Commissioner Hanks to please remove his hat when he is in commission chambers and we are in a commission meeting.
I'd like to speak to it since you did address me.
Okay.
Yeah, the reason why I wore that, you did ask me in private. The reason why I wore the hat is because it is I have no idea why. It is such a public issue. I wear multiple hats. I also wear ball caps, which are jealous they don't get the same publicity my cowboy hat gets. But that being said, I went ahead and I worked, because it is such a public issue, and it has been stated multiple times that I was repeatedly asked to remove my hat, of which I apologize if it was. I do not remember ever being asked to remove my hat. I've never been the kind of person, I don't think anybody up here would say I am the kind of person, that if you directly asked me to remove my hat, that I would say, absolutely not, I'm not removing my hat. So with that being said, I do not have a problem removing my hat for you, Chair.
Thank you.
Ms. Mayor. So there it goes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I have no other comments, and I appreciate that, Commissioner Hanks. I really do. City Attorney, do you have anything?
No, ma'am.
City Manager Lear.
Tell me.
City Clerk?
I do. The Charter Review Advisory Board asked for a joint meeting with y'all, so I wanted to get consensus to go ahead and try and schedule that if you would like to.
Charter.
Charter Advisory Board? Did they give
When?
specific?
Not specific topics yet, no. They just asked me to see if you were willing to have a joint meeting and to look for a date for them.
Did they give a time frame?
Nope.
Always willing to meet with.
Well, I guess we'll have to meet with them probably sooner than later because.
Ask them if they're available Christmas Eve at 6:30. No, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I think maybe sooner than later. So I'm fine with meeting with them. Commissioner Kerr?
I'm fine as long as it's after Christmas.
And Commissioner Emmerich?
Yeah, I got no issues meeting with them at all.
So there's your consensus. And I see nothing else.
Commissioner Carrison have, she's back.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Have
Did
any
you have any commission communications? Thank you. All right, at this point, it's 12:44. This meeting is adjourned.
I'm glad you came back and participated.